So today we're going to create this radial design using a subtractive printmaking process. So what you see here are 16 3x3 squares that have been printed from a styrofoam plate and then glued together to create 4 quadrants of radial designs. So if you look at my design, you want to look and see how they all kind of curve and they go from one side down to the other side too, so that when those squares are glued together they create a circular or radial design. So the way that you start this project is you start with a 3x3 square piece of paper, and then you're going to use a pencil to draw any kind of pattern, line, design that you want to do to create a radial design. So you want to kind of think curve, and you could simply start with a curved line. I think I'm going to start with an oval. And then maybe part of an oval there, maybe another part of the oval there. And then maybe I'll do a wavy line. And you don't want to put your lines too close together, and you don't want to try and do any small little details, because when you transfer this to the styrofoam plate, you'll lose a lot of those details. So whatever you think looks nice, and that's going to be my design. Then you're going to get a piece of styrofoam that's bigger than your 3-inch square. I just cut it out of the lid of an egg tray. And the first thing I want you to do is take your scissors and cut or trim this styrofoam down to fit your paper. Now when I cut the styrofoam, I cut it pretty crumbly. This is not a nice edge. So you might want to trim that a little bit and make it a little bit more straight and make it a little bit more of a nice edge and not so much of a almost torn edge. Then you're going to take some masking tape and you're going to tape this square to the styrofoam. And it doesn't matter what side you tape it to, it really doesn't. So I'm going to take this, tape it, go firm, tape the opposite side so that it doesn't move. And you can see through the masking tape, see your design, so the masking tape won't be covering anything up. And then you can use one of these styluses that we use for scratch art, or you could use a very dull pencil. And you might want to try both and see what works best for you. The pointed edge on the stylus might not be the best choice because you're not wanting to make holes through the styrofoam, but you are wanting to press this design into the styrofoam. So I think I'm going to use this blunt edge. And you want to press down and follow your pencil lines. And when you press, you want to make an indentation in the styrofoam, so that is going to tear your thin white paper when you do it. And you want to try and follow this as close as possible, and it is a little tricky because your paper does tear as you do it. And the first marks that you make on the styrofoam, they don't need to be perfect. We're going to actually take this paper off in a minute, and you can go back and fix or shore up, clean up any of those marks that you have. So I ended up using the point of the stylus after all. It seems to be working okay. I'm just trying to make sure I don't puncture all the way through the styrofoam and get a hole on the back. If you end up with a hole on the back of your styrofoam, it's not the end of the world, but you want to try to avoid that because the ink is going to go through that hole and get your hands all messy later when you start to print this. So it just saves on mess. Okay, I've traced over all my pencil lines, so now I'm going to peel the masking tape off the styrofoam and pull this paper off. And this is called a subtractive process because we're pressing down and taking away the surface of this printing plate. Now you can lightly see that it's indented real light. This will not be a good plate to use yet. I need to go back and I need to press down a little bit firmer now and make sure that it's a nice subtractive area. if I don't do this, when I print it, it will just be probably a 3-inch square of white, and you won't see this pattern at all. But you also need to be careful and not press too hard and then end up with a hole in your styrofoam. Another thing besides a mess with the ink, if you get a hole in your styrofoam, is it might break in that spot too and tear in half, and then we'll have to tape your plate back together because we're going to be printing this plate 16 times. A lot of printing. So the plate has to hold up. So that's another reason why you don't want to go and push too hard and make a hole. Okay, so now I've pressed the indent, and you can see it a lot easier because I've pressed down and made that subtractive process a little deeper. Okay, so I am finished making my plate. I'm going to put my stylus away, and now you're going to go over to my table and choose your colored paper that you're going to use today. So let me zoom out here, and you can see all the color squares that you can choose from. You need 16 of them, but don't get 16 to start with. Take a couple, go sit down, print those, put them on the drying rack, and then print some more. So I'm just going to take a couple, and we're just going to be using white printing ink. So I'm going to I'll take 4. So then I'll come over and get 4 more each time I come, and then I won't have to make so many trips. So there's my 4 squares. First thing you want to do is write your name on there and the day you have art on each one. And that is going to get pretty tricky because as you're printing, you're going to probably start to forget to write your name on your squares as you get going. And then you might not be able to tell which squares are yours when you're finished. So I'm going to flip all these over so you can't see the names. And then on your table is going to be a tray of printing ink, and it's going to be white, and you'll have a brayer. And the brayer is what you're going to roll the ink out onto. And you want your brayer to be covered from end to end of ink. So I'm going to roll this direction, and then I'm going to turn and roll this direction. And I pick up my brayer as I roll. And the ink is nice and sticky, so it really does stick to that brayer. And you don't need a ton of ink on your brayer, but you need a nice even coverage. So the whole roller on your brayer has to be covered in ink. And then you're going to roll the ink onto your plate, onto the side that has your pattern, your indentions on it, your subtractive. You don't want to do it on the side that you didn't scratch or poke into. And then you're going to just roll this ink over the top of the styrofoam, and you're going to need a scrap paper to go under your work. I forgot to do that, so I'm kind of getting a mess on the table. You'll get some manila paper to go under your work so that it catches the mess. And notice that I rolled both directions. So I rolled this direction and I turned it and I rolled this direction to get a nice even coating of ink. And unfortunately my plate was already white, so but you can see that all that blue print that was from the egg tray, it's gone now because I have a nice even coverage of ink on my plate. And then you're going to take and you're going to put blank side down onto your printing plate. Your pencil side with your name, that goes up, and you line this up on your printing plate. You don't want to move it around. You don't want it to move or slide on you. So you want to gently press. I always like to take my finger and kind of just gently rub all the way around, and you're going to get ink on your fingers, and you're going to get ink on the back of your paper, and that's okay. And then you gently pull this off of your plate, and you'll see that you have your pattern, the design that you created on here. Now it's not perfect, and that's what is the art of printmaking, is that when you make a print, it's not perfect. It never is, and it's not always the same. Each one might look a little different, and that's okay. That's part of printmaking, is printing and seeing what you get and noticing, oh wow, this one is a little bit different. It also is, when you print one, look and see what didn't you do so well. So like maybe this edge here I didn't get very well. So I want to look at my plate when I put my next one down. I want to make sure that I rub in that area. Make sure I rub for sure right there. Get all that on there, and then you're going to peel that back. And you keep doing this over and over again 16 times. So you're going to get really good at rolling the ink onto your printing plate. The subtractive process of taking away from the plate and printing it on paper. You're going to get real good. So that's also another reason why your plate, you don't want a hole in it. You really don't want your plate to start to fall apart before you get all 16 squares printed. And if you have extra time and you print one that's just really crummy, it doesn't look very good, print another one. Maybe you have to print 17 or 18 so that you can throw 2 out or 1 out that just really doesn't look very good and clean and a clean print. And that's okay. And so this is what you're going to do. 16 of these, so I've only got 4, so I need to do 3 more sets of 4. I need to do 12 more squares. And you can limit your color choices if you want in square colors. Maybe you pick 4 each of 4 different colors, or maybe you just pick randomly. It's really up to you. You're the artist. You can limit it to just a couple colors. You could use all the colors. And then after you print all, and you have 16 good prints, like right here, it's a little bit lighter. I didn't print the best right there, but it's still, you can see the pattern, so that's okay. I don't need to throw this one out. After you do 16, then you get to throw this printing plate away. You don't need it anymore. And then when you get all 16 printed, then I will show you how to create your radial design, where we'll take our 16 squares, glue them into 4 quadrants on a big white paper, glue them side by side to create that radial design. And you can see on my finished example here, I just chose random colors. I didn't limit my color choices, but if you wanted to do 4 purple here, and that would just be 1 big square of purple and 1 big square of red, or 1 big square of orange, or maybe you do 2 and 2. So maybe 2 purple here and 2 green here. But you might want to think that color process out and how you're going to block the colors in. If you're not going to do random, you're going to want to think that through when you choose your squares out of the bin. Okay, so now that you have your 16 radial design squares printed and they're all dry, you're ready to assemble them onto your 12 by 12 white paper. So the first thing you're going to do is write your name and the day you have art, flip it over. And if you did random colors and you didn't limit your color choice, you can just start with any one that you want. But if you limited your color choice, you want to plan that out and think about it. You have 4 quadrants, and within each quadrant will be 4 of these squares. But since I did random, I don't really have to think it through. I can pick whichever one I want. And the first thing I want you to do is look at the edges of your square. If you have the edge of your square is the construction paper is bigger than the printed area, I want you to trim that off very neatly right along the edge of the ink. And you may not need to trim a square or 2. And then you need to look at it and remember what was the corner that you started with your radial design and curved from. And this was the corner, so this is going to be the center of your first quadrant. And I always just start in the top left in this first quadrant here. The center, the corner of my design that I did everything around goes towards the center of this quadrant. So then you're going to glue this down. You don't want to be crazy with the glue, but you also don't want to be stingy, so just do a thin frame of glue on the back of each square. And then line it up with the top and side edge of your white paper. Then you're going to do your next one. This one I don't think really needs to be trimmed. It's close. The ink is really pretty close to the edge of the square, so I won't do any trimming with that one. And now when I glue this one down, I line up the center corners. I know that this is the center. It's what I was thinking everything was arched off of. So this is the center, so I make those and match those up. And I line it up with the top edge of my white paper. Try and keep them nice and straight. This red one could stand to be trimmed here on the edge. Frame of glue. Now I find the center and line that up. Pay close attention. When you do your quadrants, it needs to be a radial design. That was the whole purpose of this printing lesson, is a radial design. So if you don't glue them down in a radial pattern, then you're missing the whole learning objective. Okay, so that's my first quadrant, and then you'll start to see that this design your design starts to create a radial circle or radial design there. All right, and so then you just keep going. So I'm going to move to the next quadrant since I've got glue here that I dropped. I'm just going to do this bottom quadrant. Now if you ran out of time and didn't get all 16 printed, and we just ran out of time, then maybe you only do half of this. So you just do this left side of your paper. But hopefully you had enough time to do all 16 so you get full credit. But if you ran out of time, just do it on the left side of your paper or the right side, and then we'll trim that off, and I'll trim that off with the cutting board so that it's nice and straight for you. And then you'll just turn in half to me. So you can see this one square here, this last turquoise square, I did not cut very square, so it's almost a rectangle. So unfortunately, it doesn't reach the bottom here, and it sticks out on the side here. I won't count that against you in your grade because that was my mistake in the cutting process. I miscut there. And so then I just keep going until the paper is completely full. This orange needs to be trimmed. So you just keep going. So you'll have 4 quadrants with radial designs, and then it goes in the drying rack when you're finished. And I won't make you watch me do the rest of them. But that'll be a quadrant, this is a quadrant, you'll finish this quadrant and that quadrant.